The Olympics, at its best, is the greatest show on earth, binding nations together. And this year, for the first time, refugees are competing under the flag of the dispossessed, which is profoundly moving. But is it time to let the flame finally go out? Russian athletes have been banned for doping. Tumbleweed rolls through Olympic parks the world over. And if you applied cold business logic to the Games, no country should ever host them unless it's shooting for bankruptcy. The 2016 edition, which opens in Rio de Janeiro this week, costs only $4 billion. But Brazil is deep into recession and supposed austerity and can ill afford it. The world right now is paying too high a price for Olympic glory. I'd like to see the Games scaled right back to basics, or it's time to call the whole five-ringed circus off.
Rachel, I really disagree with you.
Good.
Yeah, and I've actually changed a lot. So when we had 2012, the Olympics, I wasn't interested. When I heard that London was hosting them, I couldn't care less. There was opportunities to volunteer, never engaged. There were, what was they called, like raffles or ballots to get the tickets for the events. Didn't care less. I just was completely disengaged. I just thought, pointless, doesn't interest me, whatever. Massive mistake. I look back at 2012, and what I did manage to do, I managed to get a couple of tickets for a couple of bits, and I feel like I missed out. I wish that I'd got more engaged at the start of that process, because the Olympics, for me, ended up being such an amazing experience. I got tickets to see a couple of things, and I felt inspired. You talk about if it was a business and what we do in terms of the cost, but the Olympics are not just about a cost for me. When I think of Olympic, we live in a world at the moment, and we're going to talk about some subjects in a bit on this show, that are so negative and like down and horrible. And the Olympics are something that bring us all together with positivity and niceness.
Of course, Michelle, but it was a huge party that we paid £9 billion for, and I think that actually Olympicopolis in East London is maybe going to be an exception that doesn't prove the rule, which is that they're rotting Olympic parks the world over. We've managed to salvage the East London's site, but in Montreal, Rio is already being predicted to be a sort of white elephant as Sochi.
Rachel, it's not all about money.
It is all about money. We live in an austerity world.
It's about promoting a nation. It's about bringing communities together. You can't always link everything down to money.
You can do that without spending many, many billions of pounds that a host nation can ill afford.
But every nation, when they win the Olympic Games, has this massive, jubilation of pride to say that, in Rio, they outbid Madrid, they outbid Tokyo, they outbid a number of very prominent countries. So what I'm saying is, I agree, financially, disaster, full stop. But I'm not sure that I would take away something that countries fight for, they really believe in.
I'm not saying
that puts
take
them
it
on the
away.
map.
I'm saying it's time to stop and go back to basics
and
maybe give it back
out.
to Greece, really scale it down so that countries don't bankrupt themselves. What do you think, Nick?
Well, you're right and you're wrong. It's worth reminding yourself that your brother did pretty well out of the 2012 Games, as indeed did London, and I think some of the success that London has enjoyed was because it is a fantastic showpiece. You put a city, and if a city works, which London did, despite your brother's best intentions, if a city works, then it does very, very well out of it. Rio, I think, actually will not benefit from being put under the microscope. But
there are riots in Rio as the flame
I know, they're trying to put the flame out. But where I have absolutely no interest in it, you may as well watch Keith Moon at play, because they are on so many drugs, so many of them are on so many drugs. Most of the Russian team, or many of the Russian team, have issues. I just don't believe it anymore. Somebody runs this fast, somebody jumps this high, jumps this long, whatever it might be, I just question whether they can actually do it without some...
Point is
so it's totally tarnished.
The Olympic ideal has been ruined not by the fact that the countries beggar themselves in putting on the show.
No, I'm with James on the money side.
But we've lost faith in the ideal.
I mean, I would do it the other way. I would actually do it the other way. I would positively encourage drug use, so I would fill them with as many drugs as possible and just see how far you... So they'd all be like, whoa! And they'd leap at about 50. I mean, that would be sensible. So then all the scientists...
I mean, that
would be really fun. I'd watch that.
Idea, no.
Well,
Emma, what do you think of my idea? That, I think we should have bottled the spirit of 2012. I was at the opening ceremony. I actually have watched it. No, I didn't get my ticket from the gaffer. Don't you dare. No, I went as a journalist. Okay. I did a big piece.
You weren't dressed as a nurse, were you?
I was jumping. I was jumping on the NHS beds.
I saw you.
I wrote a piece about the
Yes.
Olympic opening ceremony. I totally drunk the Kool-Aid. But looking back on that, how many millions did that opening ceremony
the benefits
cost?
for London have been fantastic.
Yes,
It was a
benefits
great...
for East London
no, London
has
as a
been
whole.
regenerated.
Sorry, I know,
not
but
for London as a whole.
absolutely
Come on.
massive for London.
Rachel, no, it's about to me.
Sorry, we had Emma going.
Yes,
Sorry,
go.
come on, Emma, let's
I'm
have
sort of
it.
enjoying this. It's almost like an Olympics to watch here. I think the thing
Emma's
to
actually
say...
dressed as a member of the Romanian
I know.
basketball
I've come as
team.
something
Extraordinary outfit.
Thank you. The day I take fashion tips from you, Nick Ferrari,
Yeah, it's
will be a
touche.
What would be your
completely odd moment.
Emma, actually,
Touche.
what would be your Olympic sport?
What would be my Olympic
if you had
sport?
to choose one,
It would
either
be
to play
tennis.
or watch. Oh, really? You're a
Yes,
tennis player.
I think this could also pass for that as well. I've come as anything
In the 20s,
sporting.
yeah. Yeah.
I feel that there's something interesting when people make comparisons to the World Cup versus, let's say, the Olympics, and you look at the World Cup and it's just a group of men basically playing with a ball.
Oh, we're going to get gender again.
No. But
Sorry.
what's amazing when you compare it to the Olympics is how many people are represented from all around the world.
200 nations, both sexes,
the diversity. No, but also the range of sports that you get to see. And what's amazing, I was reading a beautiful piece by a journalist who's done now 7 Olympics, who said when he first went in, he was overwhelmed, he didn't know where to go. And then he realised it didn't matter where he went, because what you would see that day, doping aside, is somebody doing their very, very best. And there's just something very different about it, because I think you can't say something like the Olympics needs to scale down and then we don't look at football in the same way. And I know football's an industry that works, but if you look at these great sporting events, and I'm not a sports fan, they do something wonderful. And I don't think you can tether it to cash in that way.
Yes, but it's 17 days and the country has to budget for, the long term. And they are going to splash out many billions of pounds. They can't ill afford, they don't have health care in Rio. The favelas don't have running water. And they're spending probably 10 billion on 17 days of
television
show
contracts
for the
they do
biggest
get
party
money
on
in.
earth.
But the legacy...
Legacy, don't even start on legacy, Michelle.
So for me, we live in this world that is obsessed with this ridiculous Z-list celebrity culture. We've got so much media around. This girl's got a bikini on, or got her boobs out, or lost a pound, or gained a pound. The role models that young people grow up with and aspire to be are ridiculous. And then when I think of sporting achievements, so we've got a guy, Luke Campbell, from Hull, my hometown. He got gold in 2012, boxing. He has inspired so many young people.
Well, how come we've got so
Hull.
many fat kids then?
How come we've got so many fat kids?
If 2012 was such a great inspiration, why have we got more fat kids now than we did in 2012?
Well, God, don't get me started. That was one of my
Well, I will get you
earliest
started.
topics.
But- So it
why?
clearly didn't work, did it?
But it did. So, for example, I'm doing the London Triathlon on Sunday, and I use the Olympic Park. I use their facilities, and so do many people that I know. We use those facilities. We're inspired by people that we watch. It brings about a new
They've still got
generation
fat
of
kids,
role
you haven't
models.
But all
addressed
they're
that.
using the
Yeah, but
Birds Nest
Olympics are not going to
Stadium.
get rid of fat kids.
Well, you said
can't just say just
it's going to
Olympics.
inspire people. Well,
It
it's
does
clearly
inspire
it doesn't. Kids are running around or doing whatever
Well,
they're
that's
jumping.
probably
Yeah, but
because of
that's-
sports fields and too much telly and iPhones, which we're going into in a bit.
Yeah, but
I think we're getting a little bit over economic about this. I think the financials. I agree with all those points, but I do think when you go back into history, the effect on countries, on their brand, on their recognition. If you look at Korea, I'd never heard of Seoul before those Olympics. It puts a country on the map, and it's not about today or 5 years. It's forever. These countries, that legacy lasts. The brand, the recognition, the trade, the inward investment. Whilst I understand when you read the papers and you look at what's happening in Rio, but I do not think it's time to turn the flame out, Rachel.